I would invite you to turn in your Bibles to the book of Exodus, chapter 22. Last week, Pastor Mike Clunky gave the sermon. I thought he was fantastic. I love hearing him preach. It was good to be here and hear him preach on the previous passage. Handled a large section of Scripture very well, and I think really set up this message today in a great way, a message on justice. So, we are in Exodus chapter 22, and we're going to read verses 16 all the way into 23. It's a bit of a section, so bear with me. We won't be able to preach on every one of these laws, but I do want you to hear them as we talk about them. Starts in Exodus 22, verse 16. It says this: "If a man seduces a virgin who is not betrothed and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. If her father utterly refuses to give her to him, he shall pay money equal to the bride price for virgins. You shall not permit a sorceress to live. Whoever lies with an animal shall be put to death. Whoever sacrifices to any god other than the Lord alone shall be devoted to destruction. You shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. You shall not mistreat any widow or fatherless child. If you mistreat them and they cry out to me, I will surely hear their cry, and my wrath will burn, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives shall become widows, and your children fatherless. If you lend money to any of my people with you who is poor, you shall not be like a moneylender to him, and you shall not exact interest from him. If ever you take your neighbor's cloak in pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down, for that is his only covering, and it is his cloak for his body. And what else shall he sleep? And if he cries to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. You shall not revile God, nor curse a ruler of your people. You shall not delay to offer from the fullness of your harvest, and from the outflow of your presses. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You shall do the same with your oxen and with your sheep. 7 days it shall be with its mother. On the 8th day you shall give it to me. You shall be consecrated to me. Therefore you shall not eat any flesh that is torn by beasts in the field. You shall throw it to the dogs. You shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with a wicked man to be a malicious witness. You shall not fall in with many to do evil, nor shall you bear witness in a lawsuit, siding with the many so as to pervert justice. Nor shall you be partial to any poor man in his lawsuit. If you meet your enemy's ox or his donkey going astray, you shall bring it back to him. If you see the donkey of the one who hates you lying down under its burden, you shall refrain from leaving him with it. You shall rescue it with him. You shall not pervert the justice due to the poor in his lawsuit. Keep far from a false charge, and do not kill the innocent and the righteous, for I will not acquit the wicked. And you shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the clear-sighted and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. You shall not oppress a sojourner. You know the heart of a sojourner, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt." Let's pray. Father, I pray as we look at these laws today and consider the justice that you have set out for the nation of Israel at this time, I pray that you would give us insight and understanding into it. These are old laws, but they're based on absolute moral truths that you apply to the everyday life of the Israelite. And so I pray that as we look at those everyday lives of the Israelites, you'd help us also see connections into our everyday 21st century lives. Would you help us, Lord? It's a task. It's something to look into because your law is wonderful and it's perfect and it reflects your heart. And so we're so grateful to be looking at it this morning. Would you lead us into it in Jesus' name? Amen. I don't know what your Bible reads right before verse 16, but you'll notice that an editor wrote the words, "Laws about social justice," right before verse 16. In other words, an editor of the Bible that you have in your hand said, how am I going to categorize this group of laws that have everything to do from capital punishment to immigrants to testifying in court to how you handle an enemy? How am I going to categorize these laws? And an editor said, These are laws about social justice. Now, when I say social justice, some of you might say, yes, we get to talk about how we're living in our society and how we need to treat people with equity. What a great thing to talk about in the church. Others of you might be saying, oh no, social justice, the social justice warriors, the social justice theories, secular theories of social justice. Will he speak good of those theories? Will he speak ill of them? What's he going to say? Is he going to poke me in the eye? Is he going to try to make me feel guilt over the fact that I live a very wealthy lifestyle in comparison with the rest of the world? What is he going to do? Well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Because this is a hard topic to talk about. Because it did come up in the presidential debates, if you were listening to what was said that night. Some of those issues that we're going to talk about today were in that debate. So what do we do with all this? Well, I am convinced, let me give you a few things here. Pastor Mike last week set up this message wonderfully because he said we have to build a hermeneutical bridge between their culture and what God was saying to the nation of Israel to our culture as God speaks to his church. His church is not the nation of Israel. The church is not the nation of Israel. So knowing that, we're not supposed to live under the civil codes of the nation of Israel, and yet, do they not reflect the heart of God? Yes. And does not our Lord say to us, be holy as I am holy? Doesn't he say that in a New Testament context? He does. So when I read Old Testament laws, I want to know, what did that mean for Israel? And then I want to know, how does it reflect God's holy heart that I am supposed to emulate, that I'm supposed to imitate and model my life after? So, you get to capital punishment. We're not going to practice capital punishment today in the church. Did you know that? We're not going to bring anybody up and kill them today. That's a good thing. But it does mean something that God would point out these sins. Never miss that. So, the other thing I want to say about social justice before we really jump into it is this. I am aware that there are social justice theories in the United States that are secular. They're not grounded in the Bible. Here's what I have to say about that. I'm a preacher, and so one of the principles of studying the Bible is observe, interpret, apply. You make observations about the Bible. You interpret what those observations are getting at. What was the author's intent? That's your interpretation. And then there's the application. How would I apply these things to my life? Well, when it comes to secular social justice theories today in our country, I believe that people that are promoting theories are making observations about our society, about the United States of America. This is the weekend before the 4th of July. I'm glad we're talking about this because there are people looking at our country and they're seeing some issues in it. But the issue is, we're not always coming to the same interpretation of what's really going on. And then we get to the application. If we're not coming to the right interpretation, we're not going to come to the right solutions, the right applications. So we're going to be disagreeing. Remember Micah 6, verse 8? One of the most famous verses in the Old Testament, and certainly probably the most famous verse in the book of Micah. He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. You know this. A lot of you have memorized this. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with God. And I noticed that God says, he has shown you. He's shown you. When I look at a secular social justice theory, I remind myself, God has already shown me his absolute truth. He's already shown me. And so I can compare any secular theory to the absolute truth of his word. What we have read today in that long list of commands is basically God saying, let me take my 10 commandments and apply them to your everyday life, Israel. So I got to be careful how I read these because I don't live in Israel in their time. But I also know that when God speaks, he speaks out of his character, his holiness, his justness, his compassion. And everything that he says is based on his holy character and his moral law. His moral law is for all people at all times. But these laws we read are kind of like everyday applications of the moral law. So we should think about them like that, okay? I believe God has shown us what is good and what the Lord requires of us. And so however I look at social justice theories, I compare it to absolute truth. Why? I'll tell you why. Because if I'm talking to someone who's an atheist, and there might be one or two or three or more here today, and you walked into church, someone invited you, glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here. But the issue is, social justice theories have to devolve into this one thing. I'm doing this because it feels right, or what you're doing over there feels wrong. It's not grounded in a moral absolute. So for instance, why do I care about children across the world that don't have a meal today? Why do some of you have Compassion International children or some other children that you send a monthly check-in to feed them, even though you'll never actually literally see them, talk to them, or go to their country? Why do you do that? And if you answer, because I feel badly about it, I would say you're partway there. You're partway there. You should feel badly because God made you with emotions. He gave you a conscience. You should feel that way. But it's grounded in the absolute truth that God made those kids in the image of God. God made those kids, and they have so much worth and so much value, more than an animal. And so we care about those kids that we'll never get to see and talk to personally this side of heaven. And it's grounded in moral absolutes. It's not grounded primarily in feeling, you see. And that's what makes biblical justice different than social justice. It's more than a feeling. There's a song about that, right? It's more than a feeling. Okay, all right, there we go. Let's get into it then. Number one, I'm told my bulb on here is a little bit dimming, so we'll have to fix that. But you do have notes in front of you, so if you can't see that well, you should have in your bulletin a set of my notes, and you can follow along that way, hopefully pretty easily. Okay, number one, justice means holding lawbreakers accountable. When you look at verses 16 through 20, and I'm going to jump over the virgin part there. I'll come back to the women in that verse 16. But if you jump into 18, 19, and 20, God kind of leads off with, these are some capital crimes for the nation of Israel. It's women who practice witchcraft, and you say, well, what about the men who practice witchcraft? Well, I'm sure they do too. I don't know that scholars know exactly what's going on here, but our best guess is that there's probably a larger amount of women that are using demonic power to control or influence things in the world. They're using occult power to do things. And God says, I'm the ultimate power. I give blessing or curse. You are not to align yourself with a sorceress who curses people or tries to bless people. That's my power alone. Don't align with demonic powers. And so that's a capital crime. You also see bestiality in here, and I find that interesting because I've been watching our culture on this issue a little bit, and I've noticed that something that's infiltrating, I would say, comedies and sitcoms is joking about that issue. Now, in their day, the issue is bestiality. Well, it's paganism. They were using animals in pagan religious worship. But it's also, of course, a perversion of sexual purity, obviously. And so God commands against it, and it is a capital crime. But I don't want to say much more than to say, I've only noticed that it seems to be making a comeback in the humor that you will hear today in different places. And that tells me we might be trying to reintroduce it into our society. God forbid. And then the other thing he has here is, if you sacrifice, verse 20, to any other god than the Lord alone, you shall be devoted to destruction. So notice he has, you don't permit a sorceress to live. Then the verse 19 says put to death. Verse 20 says devoted to destruction. It's all the same thing of saying the same thing. It's a capital crime to do these things. Now, the only thing else I'll say about this is, in the church, we don't promote personal capital punishment. I've never had an elder meeting that devolved into, so when are we going to take that person's life? Never happened. Never happened. When you read 1 Corinthians chapter 5, what you find for God's people, the church, is when it comes to perverse, immoral, and even high-handed sin, rebellious sin against God, like I love my sin, I'm going to keep doing it. What happens in the church is we do church discipline. Like that is the church version of this. We take sin very seriously, and perverse sin and witchcraft and those kind of things shouldn't be tolerated in the church. Worshiping another god should never be tolerated in the church. We're never going to have a seminar on how to practice Hinduism or Buddhism, so to inform you if you want to try that out. You will never see that at Grace Church because we take these things seriously. And if you start practicing Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, and you're a member of Grace, that would bring you under church discipline. But we would not talk about how to kill you. That would not happen, okay? So you see where we make a bridge into the New Testament and we see connections there. Here's what you need to hear me say, though. Justice takes into consideration God's laws. Justice takes into consideration the laws of our country. So I want to talk about immigrants here in a moment because that's where God goes in the text. But whatever we want to say about immigration, we have to keep in mind that God is not anti-law. Now, there's some laws that are just and some that are unjust. How many immigrants should we bring into the United States? Well, look in the book of 2 Opinions 3:15 and you'll find that answer. It's there. 2 Opinions 3:15, and it says how many people should be able to immigrate to America. And the reality is, that's not there. So it's going to take wisdom. It's going to take just laws to decide some of these things. But justice is not opposed to holding people accountable for breaking the law. That much is clear. Number 2, justice means compassionately caring for vulnerable people. Here's where there's a lot of emotion that comes into it, but I want to remind you again, it's not based only on emotion like compassion, it's based on truth. My compassion for vulnerable people is based on the fact that God loves those vulnerable people and that God has created those people in His image. What are the people talked about in these verses? Well, we're looking particularly at verses 21 through 27. So if you're following in the scripture, he says, "You shall not wrong a sojourner or oppress him." And he gives a reason. "For you were sojourners in the land of Egypt." You got to remember, Joseph and his family, Jacob and his boys and their families came over to Egypt. That's how they got there during a time of famine. And you might remember that Pharaoh caused them to live in the land of Goshen. So they were the sojourners. So God says, people that come to your country from another country, you dare not oppress them. You dare not treat them wrongly. So here he's talking about a particular attitude that we need to have towards people who come into our country. Now, I say let me be more specific. People that come into the nation of Israel. Remember, contextually, that's where we're at. I've read that there's 3 words for people who live in a country in the Hebrew language. There's a word that talks about people who were born in Israel, native-born Israelites. There's a word for them. There's a word for people who are visiting Israel, and they're going to return to their country. They're tourists. They're just visiting. And then there's this word, the sojourner. The sojourner has left their old country. the country of their birth usually, and they've come to Israel. And the reason they've come, it could be famine, or it could be like the book of Ruth. It could be tragedy, where in the book of Ruth, it's like all the men die, and the women go live in Israel. And Naomi was from there, but Ruth was not, right? And so you see tragedy, famine, hardships brings a family, a group of people into Israel. They are the sojourner. And what God does is he commands his people to have a compassionate attitude towards the sojourner. A compassionate attitude. That means when we lack compassion towards people that are the sojourner, that fall into that category, we've got a God problem. Now you say, well, what about the legal issues related to that? Well, I just talked about that in point number 1. We do uphold the law. And God's law is not opposed to upholding the laws of our government, the laws of the United States of America. Those two things are not at odds unless the government commands us not to worship God. Then they're at odds, right? But then there's the law, but then there's my attitude. And God says, you need to remember, Israel, you were sojourners. You went to Egypt. Remember what that was like? To live in a foreign country, not your own. Remember that? And now I'm reminded in the New Testament, some of you knew where I was going before I got there, that we're told that we are the sojourners. We are the exiles. We're passing through this life. And even though I am a very proud American citizen, and I love celebrating July 4th, I wish I could set off real fireworks in the state of Illinois, because I would, but I don't, because it's not legal. It's not legal. Okay. I see the guys putting their heads down, okay? And you scare my dogs when you do it, but I am a proud American citizen. I love saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I feel a sense of pride to live in this country where freedom is such the priority, and I want that to never change, and I pray about that. I want to work towards that. That's my heart. My heart is also, though, compelled by God to say, I have an ultimate citizenship, and it's heaven. In fact, I'm seated there right now, according to what the New Testament says. I have such a real citizenship, it's like I've already gone home, even though I haven't died yet. That's the way the New Testament talks. And if my citizenship is in heaven, that means I am a sojourner, and it means in some places in my own country, I'm going to feel out of step. I'm going to feel like, wow, we could do so much better in this area as a country, as a nation. That's normal because the only perfect nation is going to be the nation of heaven where King Jesus reigns from the throne. That's going to be it. And I'm glad you amen that, because that has to grip my heart in an even deeper way than any other national allegiance. It has to grip my heart lest Jesus not be the supreme authority in my life and the greatest love of my heart. So, where were we at? Justice means compassionately caring for vulnerable people. God is dealing with my heart attitude for people from other countries that happen to be living here. He's dealing with my heart, which isn't always a legal issue. It can be a heart attitude issue. Those things can be kind of different sometimes. He also throws in two other vulnerable groups of people. These two groups get thrown into the New Testament quite a bit. Widows and orphans, the fatherless. Why, if you read Timothy, you'll find out the Apostle Paul had a whole system of thinking about how to take care of widows in the church. He cared about that so much and wanted to do it well. Because if a woman is without a husband and the family can't take care of her for some sort of reason, she's a vulnerable person. She's unprotected. And the church has to say to the widows, you are our family. If you're a widow in this church, you're our family. You're our mothers and grandmothers according to Christ. And we put our arms around you, widows. The church has to say, if there's a children that doesn't have parents, we're going to put our arms around you, children, if you don't have parents. And we believe every single child deserves a mom and a dad. Do you believe that? That every single child not only deserves to be born, but also deserves to grow up and have a mom and a dad. And if you really believe that, and if God says, be compassionate like me, then we put our arms around kids. And we welcome kids into our families. And we say, I want more children in my family, not less, I want more. That's the cry of the church. That's the justice of God. Children in every family. You say, I can't get to all the ones around the world. That's why we have programs to feed them and clothe them and get medication to them and teach them the Bible. And that's why you pay $30 to $40 a month to do that for a child that is so pleasing in the sight of God, who commands that we not oppress the widow, the fatherless, the sojourner. So, in our country, how do I think about this when it comes to America and caring for people in vulnerable positions? I kind of think of it like this. When I go to a restaurant, I have 0 dietary restrictions. 0. When I go to restaurants with certain family members and friends, they have dietary restrictions. Some of you have them. We are a peanut-free campus at Grace Church because we recognize there's dietary restrictions. Now, if I'm going with certain people that I love, what I want to do is choose a restaurant that has things on the menu that will serve them well, right? I just know some people can't have gluten. I love gluten. One time I was with one of my gluten-free friends, and we were at a campsite, and we were cooking pancakes. And he said, I just don't care anymore. And he started eating the pancakes, And I was like, no, I don't do this. I was like, what's that going to do to you? And he's like, I'm going to have a really bad stomach ache in the morning, but I just don't care. Like, okay, all right. Do it. Go for it, right? But I'm going to think about the people in my life and think, not every restaurant can handle their restrictions. And I understand that in our society, we're supposed to live in a just and free society that promotes good laws, good for the welfare of the people. But I understand that tragedy can happen to people. People can make stupid financial decisions. People can sin in certain ways and leave themselves unprotected and vulnerable. Some people end up poor because they really haven't done well in the system that we have in the United States. And I'm not blaming the system, not blaming them. I'm just saying it could be partly the system and it could be partly them. Some people spend their money on really dumb things. And the church, when we come alongside people, I love doing this. We help people with food. When you give to the Deacon Fund, we help people with food. Sometimes we help people with shelter. I delivered, someone was staying over on Market Street at a hotel, and they didn't have food for that day, a meal for that day, and I got to deliver them a Taco Bell gift card and another restaurant gift card, and said, I hope this feeds your family today. Those are wonderful acts. But take a look at the poor for a second here. It's interesting, and I need to explain it. Verse 25, if you lend money to any of my people who is poor, you shall not be like a money lender to him. You shall not exact interest from him. If you pledge to take your neighbor's cloak, if you ever take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, you shall return it to him before the sun goes down. For that's his only covering, and it's his cloak for his body. And what else shall he sleep? If he cries out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. So, I got to think beyond. So God is saying to Israel, if you've got a poor person and you charge them 25% interest, you are evil to take advantage of the poor person that way. You're evil to do that to the poor. If you take the poor person's cloak as a pledge, kind of like, I'm going to pay you back, take my cloak as a pledge. You better give it back to him before nightfall. Now, I know you're asking me like, well, why take the cloak at all, please, people? Why take the cloak if you're going to give it back to him during the nightfall? the poor person keeps his dignity because he's still giving a pledge. He keeps his dignity when he gives you that pledge, the shirt off his back. He's giving it to you, saying, I will repay you. Take this cloak. It's all I got. It keeps his dignity. But you got to remember, he's cold tonight. So give it back. Helping the poor, the people in poverty, is not just giving money. Isn't it more complicated than that? Because if the poor doesn't work, if you don't advance in your jobs, I think one of the best things we can do sometimes as a church, by the way, people come into our church and they don't have a job and they meet someone that knows of an opening. I know some of you have done that, where you know of the opening, you have the job opening, and you say, here it is. That's an awesome thing. That's a privilege of being part of a church when the job opening comes through the church. I think that's awesome. Being in poverty is more than just saying, here's some money, go deal with it. I'm thinking about the cloak. I'm thinking about your dignity. I'm thinking about how to help you get into a better place so that you're not cold tonight when you're trying to sleep. It's more complicated than here's a 20. What are you going to do with the 20? What are you going to do tomorrow? I said I delivered a Taco Bell gift card. Wonderful. What about tomorrow? Because tomorrow's coming and you're going to be just as hungry then. We got to think about the cloak and think past the infusion of money into how we help in the more long term. That's compassion. And God is so nuanced when it comes to helping people in poverty. It's beautiful. My time's up and I'm only halfway preached through this. What am I going to do? Quickly. Let's go quickly. How about that? Justice means honoring God above all. Number 3, honoring God above all. So if you go to this next section, God starts saying some very interesting things. He says, verse 28, you should not revile God nor curse the ruler of your people. Remember when Paul did this in Acts 23? He cursed the high priest because he didn't realize it was the high priest. Remember the high priest had Paul struck on the mouth and he was like, God strike you, you whitewashed wall. I think that's what he said. Try that one with the person, you whitewashed walls, like, oh, wow. But that was a curse. And only God blesses and curses. You are not to utter the curse. Here's the political thing going on here. Can you give a critique of your country? Can you give a critique of the Republicans and the Democrats? Can you give a critique of the mayor or the governor or the president? Yes, 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 yes. All the way down the line, give your critique. But you dare not curse that person. You dare not revile them. Because it's God who blesses and God who curses. So honor God and keep your mouth closed and be careful what you say. Give your critique. Do not give your curse. God says, you're to honor me. Don't delay, verse 29, from offering the fullness of your harvest, from the outflow of your presses. Then he says, give your firstborn sons. I need to explain that. He's not saying give them to me so that you can kill them as a sacrifice. He's saying you give them to me, they belong to me, but there was a provision to buy them back so that they stayed with your family, right? He accounted for that, but he says all your firstborn, they're mine. All your animals, they're mine. Honor me. So when we think about this, maybe this should be obvious, but it's the obvious thing that's not said. We ground all of our justice, all of our compassion, all the good things we do, we ground it in honoring God. The reason I'm careful about my attitude when it comes to immigrants is because of God. The reason I care about widows and orphans is because of God. The reason I love well, if I ever love well, is because of God. I honor him above all. And so if any hearts need to be changed today, don't change it because of Pastor Niall said something. You change it because God said something. And we honor him above all. And that also relates to the way we give in our offerings and our tithes. Do we give? God wants first fruits. Some people in the New Testament church, that's our church, New Testament times, they would say, I write my check at the beginning of the month because I want God to have the first fruits. Oh, that's interesting. I'm not saying you have to do it that way. I'm just saying someone read this and said, oh God, you're holy. I want to give you first. I want to keep you first. So I write the check first. I think that pleases God, who wants to be honored above every political ruler. He wants to be honored above every family member. He wants to be honored above every attitude of your heart. It's all about him. God, conform my heart to yours. That's what I want. I have no time to get to point 4. It was a good point, though. We should treat all people with honesty and equity. Honesty and equity. Can I do a 30-second version? Maybe. In chapter 23, God says something very interesting. He just talked about the poor and how we're supposed to treat the poor in a special way. Don't charge them interest. Think about the cloak. Treat the poor special. And you say, okay. But then he says in this next section, if a poor person brings a bad lawsuit, don't side with the poor. If they bring a dishonest lawsuit, do not be partial to the poor. So I can say in the same breath, God has special concern for the poor, the fatherless, the widow, women who get caught in bad relationships. That was the first part. I never got to that either. God has concern for all of those people. He's so caring about those people, but he will not allow you to pervert justice. So if a poor person brings a bad lawsuit, do not take it. But if a poor person brings a just lawsuit, you dare not ignore it. Fairness, equity, honesty, treating people equally with special attention, special care given to the vulnerable. In case you want to know one more thing about that and you say, why does God want us to give special attention to certain people? Because some of us just don't need the special attention. You know what I mean? We don't need all that care all the time, but there's other people who need the care. If you're wealthy, you're not taking out a loan on your next car probably. You probably go in and you pay cash. That's awesome. Not everybody can do that. And so God is just saying, if it's not working well for you, and maybe your society has very just laws, but they're just not working for you personally, we should pay special attention to those people. Here's where I wanted to close this. And this is the real reason why I cut off point 4. I was thinking about Jesus this morning. This is a morning thought. Hope it works out well. This is an early morning, Sunday morning thought that I had, and I thought, I just want to leave you with this. I think this will grab your heart and bless you like crazy. I mean, this is Luke 14. Jesus goes to a big party, big feast, and he says, Luke 14:12, he says, when you give a dinner or a banquet, don't invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or rich neighbors, lest they also invite you in return and you be repaid. But when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind. Jesus throws in people with disabilities in here, doesn't he? Add them to vulnerable people, people with disabilities. Invite them to your homes. Feed them. Feast with them. Prioritize them over your buddies and your neighbors and the rich folks that you really like. Prioritize them. And you will be blessed, verse 14, because they cannot repay you, for you will be paid at the resurrection of the just. Does Jesus not have a heart for vulnerable people? The crippled, the lame, the blind, the poor. Literally, he means invite those people into your homes. Make them your friends. Invite them to a feast. Show them the just God that you worship and that you love, for he is compassionate. And then Jesus tells one more story, one more parable. You probably remember this one too. He tells the parable of the great banquet. he says, a man once gave a great banquet and invited many people. The time of the banquet came, he sent for his servant to say to those who were invited, come, for everything's now ready. But they all alike began to make excuses. The first one said, I bought a field, I have to go out and see it, please make me excused. Another said, I bought 5 yoke of oxen, I have to go examine them, please have me excused. Another said, I've married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. So the servant came and reported the things of the master. We would say, you need Jesus. No, I'm watching Netflix. You need Jesus. Come to church with me. No, I'm busy sleeping in. You need Jesus. Please take his invitation. No, I'm too busy making money. My job's very important. I don't have time for Jesus. The invitation goes out. Then the master of the house became angry and said to the servant, go out quickly to the streets and the lanes of the city. Bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, the lame. Does he mean literally? No, he means spiritually, doesn't he? Spiritually, invite the poor in spirit. I once was blind and now I see. Invite the blind. Invite the lame. Invite the crippled. Invite them to the kingdom of God. And the servant said, sir, what you commanded has already been done. There's still room. And the master said to the servant, go out to the highways and the hedges, compel people. I like highways and byways personally. That's my preferred translation. The highways and the byways, compel people to come in that my house may be filled. For I tell you, none of those men who were invited shall taste my banquet. Now I know this was a hard thing for a Jewish person to hear because Jesus is saying, God offered the Jewish people the kingdom and they said, no, thank you. And by the way, we want to kill Jesus. We want to crucify him. That's a hard word. But the good word of there is the master sent the invitation out to the Gentiles. You are the crippled. You are the poor. You are the blind and the lame. And God invited you and all your spiritual mess ups to come into his kingdom and come to his feast. And many of you, I hope most of you here said yes. Thank you for the invitation. I'll be there. RSVP, I believe Jesus is my Savior. That's my RSVP. I'm going to be there. And I love how Jesus at the same dinner party, he says, in your life, you ought to invite the poor, blind, and the crippled and have a party with them in your house. Because when it comes to the spiritual sense of the kingdom, which is greater than your dinner parties, heaven's greater than your dinner parties, the gospel's greater than social justice, right? The gospel doesn't equal social justice, right? We know that. The invitation of the blind into your home reflects God's invitation of spiritually blind people into his kingdom. Could that be a whoa moment for you today? How I treat vulnerable people is supposed to reflect how God has treated vulnerable me, because I was going to hell. And Jesus stopped that from happening. Today, you're invited to take communion. We have a little banquet for you today. The great one's in the future. Ushers, would you prepare yourselves? I see you doing that now. Today I have a little banquet prepared for you that some servants at Grace Church have prepared for you. And it looks forward to the great banquet that's coming. Listen, if you're a believer in Jesus Christ today, you're invited to this little banquet, this communion service. This is for you. Please partake as God leads you if you're a believer in Jesus Christ. If you're not, please do not partake today. This is not for you if you don't believe in Christ. Examine your hearts today. In a moment, I'm going to pray. The elements will be distributed. You will be served. And once you're served the bread and the cup, I'll come back up and we'll partake of our little banquet today. But I want you to remember the great one that's coming. And I want you to remember that little old blind you, crippled you, perverse you, sinful you, wicked you were invited. And God cleansed you. He gave you wedding clothes, in fact. Let me pray. Jesus, I pray over this time of communion, this little banquet that we're going to have today. God, I recognize that we are doing something today that remembers the death of Christ, his body and his blood that were given for us. May we celebrate this little banquet and look forward to the great one that's coming up, the one that you predicted, where we would sit and eat and drink with you in your Father's kingdom. We do think of the Jewish people, and we long for them to turn to you. We long for them to accept the invitation to the banquet. And so we pray for the Jewish people as well, that they would turn to their Savior, Jesus Christ, even as we have. Would you bless this time that we have right now? In Christ's name, amen.